All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cover to Cover, our parent book club. I am Shannon Eves. I am family liaison at Blue Ridge Academy. I'm here with our other two liaisons, Anna and Carrie, and our admin, Jamie. This meeting is being recorded for future reference, and we kindly request that you're mindful of your microphone and mute it while others are speaking. So for November, we had two book choices for you to choose from, the Waldorf Homeschool Handbook and Dr. Montessori's own handbook. If you were unable to read one or both of the books, that's perfectly okay. We will provide a brief overview of each educational approach before opening the floor to discussion. And perhaps during this meeting, you may find one or both piques your interest. So what is Waldorf? While I cannot cover every aspect of Waldorf homeschooling, I can provide a brief overview of what it is. So one term that you're going to hear often is head, heart, and hands. And it could be understood as thinking, feeling, and willing. This philosophy is reflected in the day-to-day lessons where students are encouraged to initially use their hands and then encouraged to use their heart and their emotions, and finally employing their head cognitive abilities. Additionally, this approach evolves as the students progress through the different stages of education, while their younger children predominantly engage through hands-on methods. And as they get older, they're encouraged to embrace their emotional intelligence. And then in the higher grades, students are challenged to integrate all aspects of their being. So our first bullet point, Waldorf has a structured syllabus that is used along with the development of the child's mind. So each year is dedicated to a specific topics that pertain to the cognitive development of the child. For instance, like the age of 7, they engage in activities centered around fairy tales, which stimulates their imagination for that age. At 8, they participate in storytelling exercises based on heroes, as they become interested in concepts of morality and the good versus evil. And these tailored approaches continue to span across the different age groups. And our next point, it's Waldorf places a strong emphasis on teachers telling the stories from the heart, meaning educators commit stories to memory as best as they can and then deliver them, often utilizing the visual aids of puppets or illustrations. Our next point is the incorporation of arts is intertwined with all subjects. For instance, after a story or even during the story, students engage in drawing or painting to visually represent the content or the feeling the story evokes. And then our next point is no textbooks are provided. Instead, students are encouraged to create their own main lesson book. And these books serve as a compilation of all the lessons covered during the main lesson time. And they can be either organized by subject or encompass the entire academic year. Students use these books to reflect on at the end of the year. They like to go over them and read them, and it helps with like reading and skills and things like that. They use them that way. So next is, what is Montessori? With Montessori, a term you'll encounter frequently is follow the child, which you'll see reflected in our first bullet point here. The Montessori approach empowers learners to take ownership of their educational journey. Montessori education is designed to be student-led and self-paced while providing guidance. In this educational model, students have the freedom to choose what they would like to learn, and teachers serve as a mentor to facilitate their learning processes. Montessori starts teaching core academics in preschool, So Montessori takes on an early approach to teaching fundamental academics. This is in contrast to the Waldorf method, which delays instruction of core subjects until the children reach the age of 7. Montessori teachers model the behaviors and values that they want children to emulate. So the teacher will start the lesson by showing how to do it for a few times and then let the students do it themselves. This also extends to household work and cooking and cleaning skills. Montessori prioritizes hands-on and active learning experiences. They strongly believe in the power of learning through doing. So now we're going to open it up to discussion. I do have a few prompts prepared, but please feel free to ask questions or share at any time any of your thoughts. So for our first question, after reading these books on Waldorf and Montessori, did it inspire you to adapt any of these concepts into your homeschooling? You're free to unmute and talk, or you can type in the chat.
Yeah, I feel like I really believed in Montessori and Waldorf when my children were younger, but I'm finding it harder as they get older to understand what it looks like to follow their interests and to let them learn by doing. Like, for example, for my 12-year-old to learn like pre-algebra, I'm like, how do I follow his interest with that? Because if I follow it, I'll probably be going in the other direction. Or, I mean, I know that with their interests, I could still let them learn through them, but it's hard to balance that, I feel like, with the other things that they have to, quote unquote, have to do, like the core subjects, that it's like trickier to find a way to follow their lead. Even though at my core, I still really believe that being the best thing. And having watched them learn so much through having done it that way, I believe in it and I've seen the proof in it working. But now as they've gotten older and they know how to read and like do basic math, now I'm like struggling to find my way back there. But I feel really encouraged and inspired that it's still possible. I just don't know how to get myself back to that place of like relaxing into the learning experience with them. And as they get older, I have a 10 and 12-year-old that I'm referring to.
Yeah, it is hard, especially with these models being so more focused on the younger grades than they are on the older grades. Finding that balance and finding something that works. Thank you for sharing.
I think we hear that as teachers, we definitely hear that same challenge a lot. These, Waldorf and Montessori tend to be used so much in those early years. And once the structure and the academic, goals become much more rigorous, it's hard to stick with that model. I think the only time I've seen it be really successful is if you can find like the right curriculum to kind of support that, and the right materials. Like Oak Meadow is a great, Waldorf inspired, curriculum that kind of balances out those standards expectations. It's a really nice blend of those two styles where it stays pretty gentle. But it is, I think that's the biggest challenge we have, right? Of balancing either one of these concepts with, even just with the needs of like public school, as a charter school, making sure we're meeting those I can statements and the academic goals that are imposed, on us as well.
I think that, kind of like in my observation, I felt like I taught my kid, even though we did like K-12 curriculum. I know it sounds really weird to say this, but we really did more of a Waldorf style in the fact that, so hear me out on this. It wasn't like completely Waldorf, like you can, explore. But there were some key concepts, some key values that Waldorf had in letting the kids explore. And because I did that with him at such a young age, now he's kind of, in high school, and when he was in college, there's certain things of the way he studies and the way he learns that's very much what I taught him when he was younger. So even though kind of Ashley, where you're saying like, how do I continue these concepts or keep it? You don't have to keep it, but you just have him remember how he learned that and keep that flow of it. I'm trying to be able to articulate it well and just kind of saying like, there's the fundamentals they're going to remember. They're going to remember how, like I said, my son remembers how to turn things into a song so that he remembers to do them. And seriously, something as simple like where he finds his keys, he'll make up a little tune or just something that keeps him focused from A to B and he doesn't forget what he was doing. I don't, but again, and he does that still to this day where he'll like make up something. And I'm like, really? You're in anatomy class and he's making up songs in his head. Again, it's that fundamentals of what they did when they were younger and how it's morphing into the structuredness of his life. So I hope I was able to clarify a little bit, but that's kind of when I was done, I was like, okay, so he still has those remnants of.
Oh, I think you froze. Did you froze just for me or she froze? You froze for a minute, Anna.
Boo! I was just at the end of the day, I'm just saying that he had remnants.
He held on to something.
I think
I will say
thing,
I read this the Montessori, no, it's not the Montessori,
the
sorry,
Waldorf
the
one.
Waldorf book a few years ago, when my daughter was home, homeschooling with Blue Ridge for first grade. And I really pulled a lot out of it in terms of just the structure of my day, and trying to kind of get that natural flow and not recreate, a classroom in the house. And, as somebody who was a teacher in a classroom for many years, it's really hard not to do that. And that's what most of us know, right? Is that kind of structure, get all the school done in a certain amount of time, and then you move on and do other things. Where I really liked how the Waldorf book just presented this more natural flow to the day and kind of gave me a window to see where things fit in, and how learning happens, even at meal times, even at bedtime. There's this really gentle flow that I really loved it. It's something I go back to even now. My kids aren't homeschooling anymore, but I still go back to like the planning of it is like, what is my ideal day? What is my current reality? And you got to be honest, and that's hard. And then how do I try to mesh the two? What's a more realistic vision for what we could be doing? And I find that really helpful. And I did share with the ladies before, on our little pre-meeting, I got an idea from the Waldorf Handbook on breakfasts. Like breakfast, like morning times was kind of a nightmare. I don't know, maybe it was because it was like mid-COVID and everything was weird, but trying to get, a preschooler and my first grader all ready in the morning, and they were very picky eaters, was a mess. But then they helped plan out breakfast for me in a very routine way. So we picked specific meals for each day of the week. So we had Muffin Monday and Waffle Wednesday, and there was yogurt parfaits one day. And I think we had Pancake Friday. I think we were like, it was like a big deal on Friday. But it was so nice and so predictable. And like, it eliminated so many fights. And even now, we don't stick to that so much now, but there's just more of it kind of reset what their expectations were for the morning, and just, we have breakfast and brush our teeth and, move on and get dressed. And it really just fixed, like, I think a routine flow issue we were having.
That's the one thing I loved about Waldorf and kept is the routine, the rhythm, or they say, instead of like the schedule. Just how do you start your day and how do you anchor your day, and then fill in all the blanks. One thing that I always forget to do, though, that this book reminded me, is the in and the out breath. Doing a in breath activity and then an out breath activity, I always forget. I always like pack too many in breaths and not enough out breaths. So like too many academic things and not enough like release like type activities. So I'm gonna try to do that now. The other thing I loved about Waldorf, and I still do, is their planning method, how they start from the year as a whole and then slowly go into the month, and then into the week, and then into the day, and how it works so much better when you can see the whole year as a whole first, and then move inwards. That's the one thing I've always done, and it's been my favorite.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because then you plug in like the big events, before you, and then you plan your academics and things around them, and you see where, oh, I really wanted to do this big Native American unit, and this, whatever it was at this time, but then you realize with holidays and other things going on or field trips you wanted to do, there's not enough time to get the depth that you wanted to get. You can kind of shift things around and have this nicer flow to everything. And now that we're back to having field trips and things again, you can make sure, you're saving space for those to happen.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to the next one because it's similar to this one. Did you find any concepts inspirational in this book? And I know it sounds like the last question, but maybe you don't want to adopt any concepts, but you found something inspired you. I know for me, I listened to the Montessori book, and I paused when she started reading the chapter on freedom, because when she mentions to wait while observing, there's no need for intervention. Wait while observing. That really hit me. Like, I need to slow down and just sit back and look at what they're doing before jumping in and going, okay, wait, we're gonna let's do this correctly, or let's change this or something. Just kind of like letting them figure it out before jumping in myself. That's a big one that stood out for me.
Something that stood out for me that I enjoyed reading about, my kids are adults now, but I love what she had to say about how children aged 3 to 6, how when their actions annoy adults, it's the reason the adults are annoyed is that they are not understanding the child's needs when they try to prevent their movement. And that's the child's attempt to gain understanding. And so it's not that they're evil. She says that when people call them evil, which I can't believe that people, anyone would ever say that, but
it's pretty dated.
Yeah,
writings.
Right, the early 1900s. But I think it's still true, though. People always make, snide remarks. Oh, my kid's a brat. But it's not really that the children are brats. It's that their parents isn't understanding them, giving them space to explore. And I thought was very sweet. And I didn't intentionally follow Montessori, though I did look into it. But in retrospect, I believe that we did pretty much follow that. And with respect to letting the kids be outside and have a part in everyday activities of daily living. You guys figure this out, my oldest got into algebra before he even had his multiplication tables memorized. That was just where he wanted to go. And I just thought to myself, why should I interfere? What? He's doing it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's kind of the only thing I really pulled from the Montessori book. I do love their activities that Montessori does.
I found it interesting because it prompted me to go and research more about Montessori, but really Dr. Montessori incorporated this for native Italian speakers, and their language is more readily adaptable to this, whereas our language is very difficult to learn. But they try to adapt it, and I guess our attempt at adapting to that is memorization, like they call them sight words. And whereas in the Italian language, it's just everything must make much more sense.
Yeah, my daughter will tell you, she's dyslexic, but she will tell you the English language makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, Italian's a lot like Spanish. It's It's very phonetic, like so much more than our language, because we have like, oh, here's your phonics rules, and here's the 8,000, exceptions to that one rule. Yeah, Italian is much more predictable in that sense. So yeah.
I also found it just a wee bit insulting. The introduction, the Berkeley professor, oh, it's the first woman's interpretation. Like, it was such an amazing event. It's what an accomplishment for a woman to come up with this.
Well, 1900 was it the 1900? Was it a
1909, I think, and she was also the first one to graduate medical school in
Yeah.
her area. I don't know.
She
I
was
just
born in 1872. Yeah,
she,
it's pretty old.
I thought she was impressive.
So I don't know if this is like
Go ahead.
inspirational, but I found it interesting how my kids were polar opposite. So where my daughter, like Montessori was like her thing, and she was her jam, and she was just eating it up. She actually went to a Montessori school, and she was going so much that she was going so fast that the director had to like work with her specifically because she kept like eating it up, and they just didn't have enough for her. So that was something that was like right up her alley, and she's still to this day, again, she models that concept. It's just so interesting. But my son is totally Waldorf, and I would say if I would have learned, it would probably been the Waldorf way too. And it's just, I'm interested to know if there are parents who are set, like, no, this is how we're going to do it, like we're going to choose one model, or do you have different models? Do you choose, like, based on your kid, what model of learning? I'm so curious to know if there are parents who do different styles for the different kids.
Yep. You can read this next question too then.
I'm struggling to understand the difference between Waldorf and Montessori, even though you already explained it. I'm like, they both sound so vague to me. Like, I get Montessori is learning through doing, but then Waldorf seems to be
It
the
also
same
does a lot of
thing.
doing too. Yeah.
So what's the difference?
The biggest differences are mostly like the academics are a little bit more delayed in Waldorf than they are in Montessori. In Montessori, they start as early as possible. Basically, they say since birth. And then with Waldorf, it is delayed until they say the changing of the teeth,
Yes.
which is basically 7.
About 7, I think, is when they introduce formal.
Yeah.
It's similar to most European schools as well. They tend to take that same approach at introducing formal academics at 7. I feel like with Waldorf, they emphasize like one main lesson a day. Like, you have your rhythm of the whole day where you do different, activities, you do your handwork, and you have your reading and art and painting. But there tends to be only one main subject really at a time. Like, you might have integrated things into it, but it's like one main lesson block that you're focusing on, which is a little tricky for us to do and to kind of mesh with public school.
For like a month, it'll be like language arts, but then you'll do math during circle time. Like, you'll integrate it that way. And then with Montessori, it's more physical. Like, Waldorf is hands-on in the fact that it's more artistic. You're drawing a lot, you're painting a lot, you're doing more on paper, and then they also do movements and stuff like that during circle time and things. And Montessori is hands-on with things. I don't know how to explain it. It's like there's objects that you use to manipulate.
Yeah, it's much more concrete, I feel like. Montessori, it's and I think the difference too is Waldorf has like the original Waldorf has a very spiritual element to it. Like, not full on religious, but it definitely has like anthroposophy. I always forget. He came up with his own philosophy, really, essentially, that has a very spiritual connection. So those who are really serious about doing like authentic Waldorf will really get into that aspect of it as well. And then Montessori is much more concrete, hands-on, physical, what's in front of you.
Also, like, Waldorf also follows a certain ages and certain things that they do at those ages and grade levels, where Montessori is follow the child. So what the child wants to learn is what you'll be learning about. And with Waldorf, it's basically laid out like you do fairy tales and all of the math. I can't remember what it's called, sorry. Like in first grade, it's fairy tales, and then you do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division together. Quantity of numbers. They do with the fairy tales, you learn your letters. And then in second grade, you go into like hero stories, and then you start doing more. I remember more of third grade where we did a lot of math, like math with farming and stories about different creation stories from different parts of the world. And then, like I said, Montessori is very child-led.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but I guess that's a good distinction, right? Montessori would be child-led, and Waldorf is certainly adult-led in
Teacher-led,
terms of, you know, what concepts are laid out. I think
I
you can
have
still
a
take the fundamentals of Waldorf and kind of spin it your own way. Like if I were to do it again or to pick it up again, I think I would just take the essence of some of those Waldorf ideas. Like I love the format of the main lesson, and I love the drawing and the artistic aspects and engagement with nature, and the rhythm and the handwork. But I think I would approach the academics a little bit differently, just in terms of touching on all of the core
Like
subjects, not just one at a time. Yeah, kind of like how Oak Meadow does it, either my own like DIY version or you know, maybe use an additional math program, like a more traditional math program, like along with all of the reading that goes with the Waldorf method or something like that. I think there's a way.
If I did it all again, I would do reading differently than how Waldorf did, especially learning later that my oldest who did Waldorf is dyslexic. She didn't learn any reading at all with the Waldorf method because it just didn't work for her. But every kid's different. And my two younger kids do not like Waldorf at all. We tried it a few times, like starting doing it, and they were like, nope. There's a question or there's a statement in the chat. In response to Anna, I'm homeschooling my 7 kids. I have found that each one naturally prefers a particular style of learning. I call myself an eclectic homeschooler because there's so many different elements of learning through our day. I feel like a lot of like more seasoned homeschoolers too, seasoned and then more families with more kids are more eclectic than following like one specific.
I noticed that too. Like you really just start to like, you collect, like it's almost like rather than eclectic, it's almost like collectors, right?
Or maybe you're more flexible.
Pieces and threads of what works, and you do what works for your kids because you know them.
Me and my friend call ourselves curriculum collectors. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, yeah, that was my comment. Hi.
Hi.
And I just love that whole thread that when we have like all these kids and all of them are so unique, there's so many different ways that they learn. And when I first started out homeschooling, I thought I'm going to find the method that works best for me, and I'm going to have all my kids follow this same direction. And now that I'm into it 17 years, I'm like, oh no, they're all different. They all are super unique, and some things work for some and some don't. And so I have to be flexible in just finding the key that opens the door to unlock their learning. And so it's been a journey of collecting lots of philosophies and trying lots of different methods.
I love it. Thank you.
Do you have a favorite, Mindy, just out of curiosity, or like something you kind of trend towards?
Well, I tend to be more structured myself, so I prefer like a consistent rhythm, and that helps me. And I found that really works well for my kids. So that whole, topic of a rhythm for the day and transitioning from one thing to the next, that kind of fits for our family. And so, you know, we do a little bit of classical, we do hands-on, we do a lot of outdoor activity. We talked about that last meeting. And so I don't know. I think I like to, you know, be pretty organized. So that lends like more towards the structured day. And so a little bit more teacher directed, I guess.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So what are some concepts that you disagreed with? And I know these concepts evoke either like a love or hate. So what are some things that you didn't sit right with you or your family, or you just don't think it's gonna work for you or don't agree with? I know for me, I don't like the Montessori method that much. It's not my cup of tea. I used to call it the tray method when I first started learning about it, because everything was on a tray and they would, you know, you present it and then show your kid how to do it, and then you would sit back and let them do it. But yeah.
I was forever trying to set up a nature table. Like, I just loved the idea and I thought it was so beautiful, and it was always such a hot mess. Like it was always slightly off season and just never pretty. And somebody would always mess with it once I got it like set up. Like, it just felt like there was a lot of like setting the stage that I could never quite feel
Pretty
worked well, at
still.
least at home. I don't know, maybe it was just me. Yeah, but yeah.
No, it was not just you.
The nature table is a no-go for you
Oh
too.
no, after a few months, it was like, nope, never mind. This isn't working. The like
there's bugs in the
stones
dirty
and
pine
nature
cones, like, nope, they've got to
decorations,
go.
and then letting them add stuff to it too from outside. I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
okay, I'll just let you put that on there. After I made it all pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just the difficult part for me is to be all in for one. It's like, I don't know, again, remember, like maybe in the 1900s when there was like less distraction, less of what we have now, it was possible. But I'm just like, it was so hard to stick to one thing in one style, because the kids are like, ooh, now I'm into this, ooh, now. And my daughter, oh my goodness, I'm telling you, she is like, I want to be a professional skateboarder. And then like 6 months later, I want to be a professional painter. And then she was just moving from thing. And I was just like, and as parents, we want to encourage our kids and like support them. So here we are buying skateboards, and then here we are buying paintbrushes, and here we are. And I'm just like, I don't like, maybe it worked for them then, but I just couldn't stick to 100%, because, and so that was probably the most of the challenging reading these books, because I'm like, oh honey, in this day and age, like some of it's a little hard. So
The one Waldorf thing for me, especially with having multiple kids, is doing the different ages and stages, the different stories, because they very much emphasize that younger kids aren't ready. So if you're teaching a third grader and a first grader, the first grader's not ready for the third grade stories. So you're supposed to like they're not supposed to be sitting in on it. And I'm like, I can't do that. My kindergartner and third grader want to do everything together. So that's what they do. And then I have like the 14-year-old, there's no way. I would be able to, that's why we mostly follow like a Charlotte Mason style, where we do most of our subjects together and then they separate for language arts and math, just because those are so individual. Yeah, that's the like one big thing I couldn't get behind. And then how teacher intensive both methods are, because while yes, Montessori is follow the child, it is still teacher has to provide the things and my kids would change their mind daily. So whatever they were interested in yesterday, they're not interested in today. And then the preparing and the memorizing for Waldorf and then telling the stories. I didn't do that. I like opened my notebook and read from it, or the book. But yeah, those are just some things. They're both beautiful.
I think they're both beautiful and I think they both have a lot of strengths. But I think again, like the thing I disagree with, like following either one, like to a T, is just remembering their origins, right? They're 120 some years old. And they
For
came out of
public
Europe. They
schools.
came out of a completely different social cultural context, and we live here in Southern California, which is incredibly diverse. And so really having only like German oriented or German origin fairy tales, as like all
Mhm.
first grade, it's like, but wait, we live with such rich culture. I really miss that diversity. And I feel like that's a huge drawback in this day and age and where we live, and getting to draw in all the aspects and all of the cultures that we interact with and that make up who we are. Making sure it's relevant. It's not relevant for everyone's context.
One thing we did find, me and my friends, we all did Waldorf together at the same age, first grade. We found they had African Waldorf homeschool curriculum for free online. And we pulled a lot of stuff from those, like to incorporate different stories.
That's amazing. That's great. Love that.
And then Lavender's Blue, I think is the curriculum. I'm actually going to switch the page so that I can show you all the resources, but one of them here is called Lavender's Blue, and it is she does try to incorporate more stories from different places than just Germany. I do know, like, before year is like all Norse myth, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
more than just Norse.
right, there's other myths out there.
Yeah. But here's some resources, and I can also put all the links in the chat. So the first three are traditional homeschool Waldorf curriculums, and they also have a lot of resources that provide help for parents, like especially Waldorf Essentials, Lavender's Blue, and then Homeschool Earth School. They have like, what do they call them? Sessions for parents, especially at the beginning of the year, that like help you get set up to do teach Waldorf, because it is a lot to first get into. And then here we have also Oak Meadow, and this one is especially for people that like Waldorf, like Jamie was saying, but they also want to follow the standards. It's kind of like a mesh of those. And then for Montessori, I have the American Montessori Society, which has a wealth of resources. Jamie shared that with me, and I still haven't even gotten through all of that is on there. And then these next two here, Child of the Redwoods and Schiller Learning, they have a lot of really good like at home resources for Montessori. Yeah. And this last one I wanted to share is a Montessori by Mom, and she has a ton of like boxed unit studies. That's all like pre-packaged for you if you use Montessori with different topics. And I have linked all of that into the chat if you're interested. And I wanted to share that our next reads are going to be in January. So we won't come back till January, but we do hope everybody has a wonderful winter break and the upcoming fall break. We'll be discussing the Whole Brain Child, so I'm excited for that one. And in February, we have 3 options. It's a lot, but you can choose and pick which one you want to read. There is How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and Listen So Your Kids Will Talk, and also How to Talk So Your Teens Will Listen and Listen So Your Teens Will Talk. And I'm going to definitely be reading both of those. I have a current teen, and then, oh, they're going to creep up there fast. And an alternative is Crucial Conversations, which I'm also excited about that one. In March, we're going to be hitting spring with project-based learning. And then in April, we're going to get outside and talk about Balanced and Barefoot with an alternative of Grow Wild. So I hope to see you guys in the coming months. We can continue to talk. But I want to say thank you for attending. I hope to see you in January, and I want you to have a wonderful fall and winter break. I'm gonna stop recording.